The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everyone. Good crack of noon to our friends on the East Coast. I am Todd Obert from Productive, joined here alongside me virtually, but technically in the same headspace, is Chuck Everette, Field CISO Advisor for ESET. He's got a great talk in store for us. He's got a lot of cool stuff to talk about. So thanks for hopping in on that. Really appreciate you guys hopping in. We're gonna meet Productive in 1 minute. Then we're going to get straight into what Chuck has to offer, how MDR XDR offloads our SOC workload. He's gonna talk about best practice for account hygiene, creating a truth list, giving you guys a scorecard, and so much more. But before we do that, let's meet Productive in 1 minute. So who is Productive Corporation? Well, I really appreciate you asking, even though you're muted. Productive Corporation provides security solutions for mid-size companies. We specialize in answering technical and licensing questions. We also implement, test, and optimize all the things that we do. Everything from a security assessment, AD security services, to configuration assistance and UTM services. We have a lot of stuff we can help you with. We also produce third-party content like the event we're at today. It's educational in nature, helping you understand what tech is relevant for your environment. All of that can be found on productivecorp.com/solving security. The bottom line is we're here to help, whether that's implementation, assessment, figuring out licensing, optimization services. One email comes to all of us, help@productivecorp.com. The people that can help you the most are going to respond, and it really works out. So that is what we would like you to do. So, but for now, we're going to turn it over to Chuck Everette, who I told you guys at the top of the broadcast is a field CISO for ESET, along with, I believe, the current CISO of the city of Fort Lauderdale. So he's got a lot of real world experience. And when I was talking to him a little bit before the broadcast, he was saying, going over what he's going to talk about. So not only, it's that, but, he's talking about, hey, here's what's been happening in the last 2 weeks. So that to me is very exciting. So let's give a warm virtual round of applause for Chuck Everette. Chuck?
Hey there, thanks for the warm intro. Let me share out my screen here.
Looking good.
Let's see, make sure I get the right one.
Yeah.
There we go.
Oh.
All right.
Yep.
All right. Well, thanks for the invite. Really do appreciate being here. As you said, I do enjoy talking about, cyber threats, the landscape, what's going on out there, and, what can we do to make a difference? So kind of with that, I'll jump into here and kind of, my talking points is kind of the state of cybersecurity, what's working and what's noise. One thing I want to kind of keep open here, guys, put the questions into chat. I'm here to, kind of answer what's going on using my experience. I'll get into a bit more of my experience and kind of what's going on. Let's see here. There we go. So in today's conversation is kind of what was already covered there. I'll be talking about, kind of ransomware today. What's been happening the past 2 weeks with the ransomware gangs? What are we seeing? What are we seeing from nation states? And how is that trickling down to the ransomware gangs? And then how is it even getting down to, not only enterprise clients, but the small SMBs, the clients of, sub 100 systems? What's going on there? What does it mean to you today? So is the noise just buzz, or does it actually mean something? And then let's talk about, the human factor. That is something that I'm seeing coming up more and more out there. The noise, and then cyber hygiene, kind of your 90-day plan. What's actually working, what's not? Where do you need to start? Kind of how to kind of back it up a bit. And it's not always about the tools, but a lot of times it's about your processes and kind of basics there. So again, I want to kind of make this a back and forth. Feel free to ask the questions. We'll leave some time at the end here to answer those, kind of jump in and go from there. So starting it off, who the heck am I? Why am I here? Why am I here talking with you guys? Just kind of give you an idea. I've been around IT for well over 20 years. I'm one of the old timers. I'm an old school CISO where I roll my sleeves up. I get, a deep dive into what's going on, what's working out there. And then I have probably well over 2,000 connections via Discord channels or Signal channels, that type of stuff, where we talk about what's going on. I have contacts with nation states, with the Israelis, with other countries, what's working, what's out there. Because of my federal contacts of being a CISO for the city of Fort Lauderdale, which is over 200,000 people. I had the honor at RSA meeting with multiple different representatives from different countries. It's kind of funny. I was talking to the CISO for Finland. Well, he's got 400,000 people for his entire country. And here, in the U.S., we have cities that are almost as large as countries. So really kind of puts things in perspective there of how do we take this stuff and how do we apply it across the board. I've been a trusted advisor for the federal defense space, multiple agencies. More recently, I've been doing field CISO work. I've been doing field CISO work for different vendors. ESET, is very forward thinking. They brought me in to be kind of the voice of the client. What's working out there today? What do they need to have in their product? What services do they need to have to move the needle forward? And so that's where I'm providing that back. I'm vendor agnostic in a lot of ways, but I am working for ESET because of their threat intelligence and what they have. They're a research first type company. They put it back in so their products are stronger because actually what's going on out there. It's not a reactive, they're a proactive. And then I also do, vCISO work, basically for, clients and companies that can't afford a high-powered CISO. They're coming in with, 20 years experience. I come in to kind of help in that advisory role, mentor their staff, those type of things. And same thing, I'm doing that with ESET. I'm going into our clients there. So again, anything pops up, that's kind of what we're here for. I've worked with 7 of the Fortune 10s and over 60 of the Fortune 100s. That's basically working with advisors, going in at vendor state or consultancy, those type of things. Or a lot of times I work with the federal government space when there's breaches, security or financial breaches. I'd be brought in by Homeland Security to look at it. So a lot of the big ones out there, Target, Home Depot, those type of things, Intel, I've been involved with a lot of those on behind the scenes. I've been embedded with large MSPs. We're talking MSPs that are, over 2 million endpoints. I've worked with a lot of the security vendors out there, ConnectWise and Kaseya, on integration of security products into their stuff. So bottom line, way too much background. I've spent too much on that, but just kind of give you an idea of what I do, why I'm here, and then kind of, where does my expertise come from to speaking with you on. So with that, I'll just kind of jump into, let's talk about, ransomware. Everybody's talking about ransomware and phishing attacks and the emerging threats. Where I want to bring it up is that we've seen a lot of stuff come up with nation states, especially out of the Russian-Ukraine war, other stuff coming out there. And we used to see that basically, threats would take 2 weeks, a month, 2 months to trickle down to the ransomware gangs, to the smaller fish, to be able to pick that up. Now we're seeing it happening within hours, if not kind of predecessor to that. Log4j was a great one. We saw that come out on a Thursday. On Friday, they officially announced it. By Friday afternoon, Hive and Conti had already ransomed 3 more hospitals. Actually, it was a total of 6 hospitals after 48 hours, utilizing the Log4j vulnerability. That's how fast we're seeing stuff adapt out there. So a lot of times now it's no longer of, what can I do to, defend against this, report on it. Now it's like, hey, what can I do to prevent these? So kind of we have to really shift that mindset. Ransomware attacks are basically coming, getting bigger out there. The stats I'm pulling off are from Black Fog. Basically in Q1 of 2025, 278 public ransomware attacks. That's up over 45% from last year. And those are the only ones reported. I can tell you behind the scenes, a lot of attacks are not reported. We talk about them between security experts behind the scenes, what's going on, what to do from there. But basically, there's another, almost 2,100 undisclosed events. And that we're saying that's basically about another 113% increase. As I said, this isn't going away. We're actually seeing cybersecurity budgets being cut for the first time over the past 2 years. It's the first time we've seen that in over 10 years. The threats aren't slowing down. It just, we have to be smarter about it. We're seeing the most targeted stuff is healthcare, services, government. Those are the big ones, but we're also seeing the small SMBs. We're seeing a lot of the ransomware as a service, and I'll get more into that, of how that's trickling down and what they think. small orgs, you think you're safe, but you're not. It's just one email. And we're seeing those targeted attacks, things coming through, AI being used. Adversarial AI is one of my hot topics I'd love to talk about. I'm not going to get deep dive into there, but basically as we're using AI, they're using AI to basically how do I get around your defenses? How do I write better emails, phishing attacks? The other critical thing too is, I can't talk about it too much, but I can tell you that there was a public shooting here in the U.S. There was a defense contractor. He was a high-level executive in that company. A nation state had a dossier on him, knew that he had a daughter that went to that school where that public shooting had taken place. They sent him an email within 20 minutes saying, here's the complete list of all students shot, killed, or wounded. As a parent, knee-jerk reaction, he ripped that thing open faster than anything. It was a compromise. Luckily, his company in that detected it, but at the same time, it's that type of attack. They're getting smarter. They're getting faster. I'm seeing those type of things where basically they're getting a lot more intelligence. And how do we get somebody to click on something faster?
Wow.
And I'll say this.
That's crazy, Chuck. That way, yeah, that's a wild one. But hey, all right, I'm back. I don't know what that beep was.
Okay.
But my question is, where are you seeing the security budgets being cut in cybersecurity?
I'm seeing a lot of it cut, because before security was always protected. And I've seen it basically just overall, they're saying, okay, you know what? You got to cut 10% or 20% of your budget. Very similar to what they've done to IT with the downturn in some of the markets. We've seen that hitting companies for the first time. With that, we're seeing a tremendous amount of alert fatigue. So we're seeing clients really trying to, consolidate their tools. We've said, hey, yeah, let's get all these tools out there. Let's get all this information reporting in. Let's get a single eye on glass. And they're getting alert fatigue. And so now it's like, can't really cut staffing, but how can we make our staff work smarter? And I'll kind of get more into that. So that's, as I said, I'm seeing more companies, where they have to choose. They're choosing to get rid of the consultants. They're getting rid of some of their tools or redundant tools, those type of things. And that's where a lot of times people like myself and you come in and we step in and say, hey, let's take a look at your tool stack. Where can we work more efficiently and better?
Yeah, totally. Thanks.
All right. And we're seeing ransomware increase as a secondary payload, especially in state-sponsored espionage. Basically meaning that they're getting in to get after something, to get information, and then what they're doing is saying, hey, we got in, we got our back doors, and what we're doing? We're just going to sell that off on the dark web, and we're seeing that out there on a very, very regular basis. Two big ones that have really popped up in the past 2 months, that's Ghost and Lockbit. Lockbit, 3.0 is out there now. You can see here, I actually took their logos. Their logos are actually marketing. They're out there. They're fast moving. They're global. As they, different parts get shut down, they splinter off and they get there. And they're sophisticated. They don't rely on fancy exploits. They basically just slip past what your detection is now and go straight for the backups. I tore apart 2 ransomware scripts, or basically scripts that go out. And typically the first or second item in there, they're looking at your backups. They're looking at your Microsoft Shadow backups. They're looking for your cron jobs. They're looking for that out there. And depending on, they're using AI to identify what products you're using, Veeam or whatever else. And basically they're going from there. And they don't basically stop the backups. They make them look like they're working, but yet they change the encryption keys or they do other things out there. So it's making sure your backups are immutable and you're doing them on a regular basis and you're testing your backup. How many times I've gone in with a client saying, oh yeah, we have backups. They've never tested them. They go in and look out, and sure enough, their backups have been corrupted for over 3 months. That's a common tactic I'm seeing out there. Lockbit's been shut down. They keep on coming back. As I said, they keep on fragmenting. The Ukraine war definitely put a dividing out there for Lockbit and Conti and others. They kind of divided up between the Russian and Ukraine side, which basically got a lot of the code and stuff out there even more so. It's really muddy out there right now, and they pivot quickly. And as soon as they see an opening, they see something, they're kind of ambulance chasers, and they dive in. These groups are like franchises. You shut down one, 2 more pop up 2 blocks away. We see it over and over again. They're not only just watching for the big names, they're also looking for the fast movers. If you have a press release go out, that typically puts a red flag up for you. And I'll just be quite honest with that. Have your press releases, you need to have it, but at the same time, if you're doing that, make sure you have all your bases covered and you're really looking out after that. Kind of, I say, as soon as you put out a press release or something comes out, you want to basically go on red alert, looking for any nuances, because they're going to start probing you and it's going to start coming in fast and furious. And Ghost is well known for that. So ransomware as a service. Won't cover this too much. This has been out there. This has been booming. But I can tell you this. I can go out there and I can, for $50 on the dark web, I can buy a ransomware as a service kit. I can rent it out. I'll get weekly updates. It's a monthly fee for $50, and I'm getting professional stuff. I know different gangs put out different updates on Thursdays or on Wednesdays. I can go out there, get their new scripts and basically new attack vectors going out there, and then I can buy lists of what's out there. It's, as I said, they're very professional. They have their own HR, their own marketing. It is sophisticated, even more sophisticated than a lot of the businesses that I work with. And it's basically affiliation or franchises. And a lot of times, hey, if you go in, you get that big fish, they'll help you out on the backside. They'll take 10%. But they're harder to trace and they're harder to stop now. So you got to kind of get that there. It all comes down to intelligence gaps. And basically, I will tell you this, that 90% of the clients I go into that have had an incident is that they've lacked early detection. They're missing that. They have supply chain blind spots. I just went into another city recently, and they had basically set up a server for their vendors to come in. They haven't reviewed those access. They didn't enforce MFA. So basically, it's just like the Colonial Pipeline. You had a vendor that left the company. They left their VPN active. They left their access in. He used the same password that he did for his VPN, for his Gmail. It got compromised. They got in. I'm seeing that over and over again out there. But where's your detection? Where's your third party? Or I saw a lot of stuff during COVID. People migrate out to the cloud. They got these hybrid environments. Or they're assuming that the cloud provider is doing the security for them, got the firewalls in place, those type of things. Again, guys, pull up some assessments, pull people in like myself and others to kind of help you figure out where your weak spots are, see where that's at, because we're seeing that. Cloud and SaaS misconfigurations is one of the major ones I'm seeing out there. Even Kubernetes had a major breach. Citibank had a breach where they had default passwords for certain things. It's out there, and people just don't realize that. They assume somebody else is doing it. And then on top of that, you take your talent shortages, and it even compounds it more. We're seeing more and more where basically cybersecurity experts come in, or cybersecurity people come in. You get them started in the door, they get their skill set up. Next thing you know, they're leaving a year, 2 years down the road. Average tenure right now is about 18 months, and they're going off someplace else and making 25% more. We're seeing that, and they're taking that knowledge with them. They're so busy being reactive, responding to stuff, they're not being proactive, doing your documentation. Therefore, they're leaving a ton of gaps out there for you. So that is one of the biggest things I see out there, is the lack of documentation, and then the lack of the human factor. What happens too is I'm seeing it. This is a real life story, and when we talk about the human factor insider threats, is you have an employee, they become disgruntled, they're overtaxed, they're overworked, they feel that they're underpaid. When they're approached by somebody off the dark web, or even another legitimate company saying, hey, you give me access to these systems via an MSP or a direct wherever, we'll give you $50,000. And then if we were able to obtain any credible stuff there, we'll give you a bonus of $100,000. I'm seeing it where it's being paid. And we're actually seeing employees now leaving, going to other companies to be able to do that. We're seeing companies out on Indeed and other websites posting pen testing jobs, saying, hey, you break into a company, we'll pay you, 20 grand. You document everything out. Well, here, these are, dark web companies hiring legitimate pen testers to break into companies. And so, we're seeing that out there. So the insider threat, actually wrote a Forbes article on this. It's huge. And they're saying 95% of cybersecurity breaches involve human error. And that is basically somebody clicking on something, a misconfiguration, or it's, someone actually selling off credentials or selling stuff, or, accidentally leaving RDP open, or those type of things. It's out there, and this is the most biggest link. And I will tell you that I've gone into multiple different municipalities and companies over the past year, and I'll tell you the click rates of basically when we say you were doing phishing testing, click rates are basically often somebody clicks on a simulated phishing. We used to like to see 2 to 3%. I'm seeing numbers now of 10 to 15% with 5 to 7% credentials being entered. It's absolutely horrendous what I'm seeing out there. Because of AI, things are getting more sophisticated. They're getting in there, they're getting into emails, they're seeing who you do business with, and they're sending those emails. They're not even just compromising you, they're compromising your vendors, and then the vendors sending it an email. I'm seeing more stuff linking into Dropbox where they're actually putting in, Dropbox is asking for your Microsoft 365 credentials. It looks legitimate, those type of things, and people don't realize it unless you're highly trained. And so I'm definitely, one of my big things I'll get on to here with the cybersecurity hygiene is your security awareness training. You have to change it up, and you have to include the new AI tactics and what we're seeing out there and the adaptive stuff. So,
yeah, I mean, when we talk about it, Chuck, we say, the hackers, they only need to be right once. Right? There's millions and millions and millions of emails or points of contact trying to exploit end users, and they only need to be right once.
Exactly. And, and I have a very pessimistic view of this too. People say, hey, you know what? Hey, we're doing great. We're 99% there. For me, that means you're still 1% unsecure. But guys, honestly, you'll never be 100% secure. It's just not going to happen. It's just not feasible. Even the governments in that struggle with it. So it's just, okay, what can you do? And it's taking the mindset of, if you're going to get breached, it's when you're going to be breached, and are you going to be ready for that?
Yep, exactly.
So, I'll kind of go through here the insider threat spectrum. We've kind of already covered off on that. I'll kind of skip through this a bit here. What I want to talk about is that the state-sponsored insider ops. So we're seeing, the bottom left-hand side there, that's the Russia and North Korean. We're seeing more of that. We're seeing China is huge in intellectual property theft there. The tactics and what they're doing is rolling down to the small cyber gangs and getting it out there. And we're seeing more and more of that out there. North Korea, they're saying right now about 60% of their income that they get in is actually made from ransomware and state-sponsored banking fraud. So it's out there, and everybody's a risk at that. And even with, I've seen municipalities, $21 million or $5.1 million going out the door with fake financial fraud stuff, and it's difficult to get that back once it leaves the country. They're targeting contractors and suppliers even more so to get in. A great example, I actually, I can kind of talk about it a bit. I have actually helped stand up a little company called Carbon Black, which was Bit9 and before that Parity. They got broken into by a nation state. They stole their signing cert, and they were trying to get into defense contractors. Hey, they can't go after you. They're going to go after your security company. It was kind of a wake-up call for them. We kind of went in there. I was brought in to kind of fix things up. But we see it, and that's a common thing. So it's just not your security, but it's like, hey, if they know what you're using for security, if they know what other applications you're using, especially if your third-party vendors are advertising, hey, you're a client, that puts a target on your back. Sometimes you want to do it as advantageous to share that, hey, your partnerships, but other times, for me as a CISO, I don't want people to know what I'm using for software, because that gives them the first line of defense to be able to get in there. So kind of, keeping that stuff kind of close to the chest, it's good at the same time. And that's why, like a lot of stuff out there, like with ESET, you don't see them a lot of times in the news and that, because there's a lot of stuff behind the scenes we're used, and people don't want people to know what security you're using because it's effective. They don't know about it. It's harder for them to get around it. So, FBI and CISO both have been alerting. I'm getting probably alerts on a monthly basis right now from the FBI on insider threats. Things are going on out there, critical infrastructure hacks, those type of things, going after that. Because, hey, let's go after a $10 an hour, municipal employee to get access to, a water tank. Bingo. We're seeing that type of stuff happen, and they're being approached. All right. Countermeasures, basically, it's the basic hygiene. Implement role-based least privilege. Use behavioral analytics to log and detect. Basically, hey, you shouldn't have employees logging in from Ukraine. That's the one big thing. Geofencing out there, IP address restriction, MFA enforcing, security awareness, phishing simulations like I talked about, enforce offboarding. So many times I see it where basically people offload, they turn off their AD account. Well, what about everything else that doesn't have AD? An average organization has over 50 other applications that aren't tied in with AD. Did you go through and disable all of those? Are they able to get into it? I've seen so many times where basically HR person left and they left their access open. They have access to all the pay and everything else. And I've seen it where they've gone in there and actually changed the deposits and the banking information for people for their paychecks. Next thing you know, they had 100 employees' paychecks be stolen because they didn't close out a former employee leaving. So offboarding is absolutely huge. All right. Now we're getting down towards the end here, guys. I want to kind of talk about the 90-day plan. What's out there, cybersecurity, hygiene, some of the basic stuff. I know I've covered off on quite a bit already. Again, keep the questions coming in. We'll jump in there. Big one here, guys. Cybersecurity essentials. Basically, it starts with asset management. How many times I walk into an organization and they don't know what they have because they haven't had time to do documentation. What do you have in the cloud? Is it Azure? Is it Google? It's, where is it at? AWS. What do you have on site? What firewalls do you have? Are your firewalls patched and up to date? Okay. Are you running end of life Palo Altos? Those basic type of things there are, hey, okay, you got, 21 Linux servers. When was the last time they were patched? What are the 21? I've gone to organizations where it's taken me 6 months to find all the assets and find out that, hey, they had 175 end of life, 2003 and 2012 servers, those type of things. You can't patch it. You can't fix the vulnerabilities. You cannot protect it if you don't know what your stuff is. So asset management is critical. There's some incredible asset management tools out there that ties in with all your other security tools. It kind of pulls everything together and helps you from vulnerabilities to other stuff. Absolutely critical. Backups and basically isolating your critical data. That's those immutable backups. Once you make a backup, nobody can touch them. Test it. Alert fatigue. This is a huge one. Alert fatigue and tool fatigue. We've had so many years of, hey, get these tools, get the stuff coming in. You can see all this stuff. But the problem is you're getting them in. I just talked with a big blue Swedish company, big box retailer, can't say their name, but basically they were getting in over 500,000 alerts a week and they weren't looking at them. They didn't have a chance. Therefore, when critical stuff came in, they missed it and therefore they had some issues. So, and that's a common one. It's not just for the big boys, but it's the little ones too. You assume you have it out there. Who's looking at those alerts? Who do you have for a SOC to look at that can put the stuff together? And you can't always, depend on automation. You got to have some common sense there, and you got to get other sources coming in to kind of pull it together. And again, this is where bringing some cybersecurity experts in, like ESET and others, kind of figure out what that will definitely help with that.
Hey, Chuck, do you have any tips on how to minimize the alerts from Microsoft? I mean, they're a large part of every environment, and some of the stuff they send out as alerts, it seems like marketing, not actual alerts. So is there a way to, really distill that down?
It is. You really got to look at your different alert sources coming in. Your Azure, your domain stuff coming in is absolutely critical. You want to see abnormal stuff. But the thing there is you really got to get down, okay, what is your regular traffic? What's abnormal traffic? Once you get that isolated down, you can basically then put to bed all your regular alerts, but then you create thresholds. Okay, hey, this is a normal alert. I get this 10 times a day. Okay, if I get it 35 times in one day, that's an alert now.
Yeah, that's
those type of things. Or I get that, and I'm able to correlate it back with multiple other things. That becomes an alert. Kind of the correlation between stuff. Getting some of the smart infrastructure in place is the critical one. It's having to take the time to set it up. It's just not put it there. There is no set and forget. And you got to have the expertise, and you have to have the documentation where you understand your environment.
Yeah, I think there is no set and forget. The security is a continuum, right? You always need to be working on it. Always need to be evolving. You always need to be calling people in to get a different look at it.
Yep. And that's the thing too is, I do reviews of Microsoft alerts on a quarterly basis. not what alerts are coming in for my clients, but what new alert types do they have out there? What's interesting? Where can I correlate that back to? What can I do? Big firm believer in SOAR, basically, and that's basically doing some automated response stuff. But
Mm-hmm.
again, I really, really encourage everybody to go from a reactive to a proactive stance. And that's basically a preventative stance, and to being, because you need to be proactive. You need to be patching. You need to be looking at stuff. You need to be able to stay in front of it. If you're constantly reactive, looking at alerts after the fact, it's already too late. And we're seeing that. Before, we used to have weeks, days, hours. Now we have minutes or microseconds to respond to stuff.
That's true. Hey, I have an alert coming in, Chuck. We're getting close to the bottom of the hour. So let's,
Yep.
roll through.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah. So just, incident response plan, the key thing there is have an IR response. Even if you're a two-man shop, create and rehearse one. Typical ransomware. How many times I see where you don't have an instant response plan for natural disasters? I have a lot of clients in Florida, flooding, hurricanes. You have a data center wiped out. What is your IR plan? Or even if your normal stuff is, where can people work from? So those type of things. Calm. Basically, if something happens, how often are you're gonna get a comm schedule out there? Nothing's worse than having to respond to comms requests every half hour when you say, you know what, I'm going to comm requests 3 times a day. In the meantime, I'm going to be working on this. Those type of things. Establish roles, create escalation plans, have that gray R, that you got to have that IR plan, because it means less panic and faster recovery. Also have cybersecurity experts on retainer. A lot of times, if you have that, it'll actually make your cybersecurity insurance actually lower. So that's another part there too, to look at. Okay, hey, what do I have? What can I do? Is if you have those retainers in place, you're a lot of times going to save 50, 60% instead of getting them saying, I need somebody right now. You're going to pay that premium price than if you had them on retainer. So again, those type of things right there. Trends in closing. Last couple of things I've talked about here. Expect AI agents, adversarial AI. Q dates coming up. They're talking about the quantum threats and that. They're saying that's going to be basically coming up here in the next 5 years. That date's locked in. The government's consistent, and we're seeing more attacks against hybrid environments. Convergence of OT and IT. Basically, we're seeing more and more of that out there. We're basically critical infrastructure, other things. They're getting into your IT network to get to your OT network. How many times I've still walked to the manufacturing plants and I'm seeing a flat network. You can get all the way over into your production lines from your IT side, vice versa. Gotta, that expanded surface, you gotta get around that. So big one is look at your privacy laws, look at your compliance. Compliance isn't security, but there's some huge risk out there. I got some numbers around that of how much it costs. I've seen MSPs and other small companies go under with one breach with the fines that they get hit with from HIPAA and other stuff out there. So, and the big one there, guys, is leaders. Leaders got to balance between innovation and security fundamentals. We got to get security back down to the foundation of our applications and our companies and build from there. It's no longer a bolt-on. So many times, finance and everybody else has thought of security as just kind of bolting it onto the side with IT. It's no longer the case. IT is at the foundation, and at that foundation is security. So that's my big one there. Now, my question is for you guys. Come Monday morning, what's going to change? What are you going to do? What have I talked about here? What's the one gap you can close this quarter? I've talked about. I've kind of pointed out what's made you think about it. Start where you're at. Don't wait for the budget cycle. Don't wait to get money in. What can you do now? Where's your low-hanging fruit? There's a lot of resources out there. I talked about the CISOs on here, cybersecurity awareness Trump out there, ESET, others are out there. Go after it. Find your weak spots before your attackers do. That's my big thing for you guys.
Yeah, that's huge. Thanks so much, Chuck. I really appreciate that. That is great stuff. And thanks everybody for hopping in. This was a very enlightening conversation, and wow, super necessary to continue to talk about and continue to act